Welcome GRD131, Graphic Design 1, to our Fall Harvest Fest billboard. And this is part 2. So I'm going to start working on the billboard and get you started. And hopefully you have your flyer done back from ex4. So what you're going to do first, so you don't mess anything up here, is you're going to go to File and Save to the Cloud. And to your same folder, to your 131 folder, just call this ex4, so you can change the number on here, and you can just put like BB at the end of the Fall Harvest. Just call it that, Fall Harvest BB, and hit save. And wait till it's done syncing, and it is. Now, I still have my other one open. I'll let it open for now. I don't need to have it open. I'm not going to try and do it exactly like this. I'll just kind of do it the way I think I should do it. That's what I did the first time. I just kind of thought my way through it. So this is the one we're going to change. Now, this is 8.5 by 11, and we're going to change it to a billboard size. Now, a standard billboard size is 48 by 14. So 14 high, 48 wide, and that's feet. Now, we're going to try to do it in here so it's in proportion. So what I did was take 14 divided by 2 is 7, and 48 divided by 2 is 24. Now, we don't want to work on 24 inches because that's pretty big, so we'll take half of that again. So we'll do it 12 by 3.5. So I'm going to make my height 3.5, 3.5, and my width will be 12. And that's our page. And I took the border off right away because we don't need a border. We already have kind of a very narrow area, even though it's horizontal. We don't need to be taking away more space by putting on a border. So I'm going to get rid of the border. And, you know, from here, I mean, you could certainly just go and do something like this and say, oh, we're just going to do that and put Harvest Fest there and put this over here and put this stuff here. I mean, you could do that. It won't look really good, but I mean, you could kind of start doing that. I mean, that's a way to start it, to say, oh, okay, let's get it in this area, and say, oh, well, this won't fit. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to keep it in that order, but I was thinking of traditional billboards where you see kind of a big like top left element and it moves you in. I think I've showed you other videos where there's always like a picture and it moves you in. So I'm going to try that first before I just start putting things in here. And also, if you ever have your information not showing up kind of in this pasteboard area, make sure you click on the area outside here and make sure that this thing, clip content, isn't on. Just make sure it's not gray. So if it's white, then you could see stuff out here. So you might want to keep stuff out here. I don't know if we're going to use invite you to their Fall Harvest Fest. The problem with Fall Harvest Fest is that the three words don't center well, because if you want to break it up, then it's Fall Harvest Fest. And if you want to break it up the other way, it's Fall Harvest Fest. So it's not, I've tried it both ways, and that's why I tried to keep it together, and you might even want to squash it to make it more narrow so it fits in the space better. But before we do that, I'm going to mess with a picture, even though I don't like you messing with pictures, and I think we should work with text before we mess with pictures, but it's a billboard, and a billboard always has some kind of image that attracts you first. So you could go here and just look for a pumpkin. I just will search pumpkin and just go from there, because it's a Fall Harvest Fest. I mean, you could look at corn and, you know, other things, but I'll just try pumpkin because that's what usually people are looking for. So I'll go to images, and you could look for any kind of pumpkin. I'll try to do things different than I did the first time. I think I had some angled pumpkin. I used this thing last time because I thought it was neat because it kind of angled in, but you don't have to. Here's a pumpkin here, and there was a pumpkin up here that looked decent. This one is a nice looking pumpkin. And there's someone holding a pumpkin, a kid holding a pumpkin. There's all kinds of things you could do. I'm going to try this one. I'm going to click on here. And I have this little extension that makes you view image, but you could just right-click here and say copy image. And a couple things I want to show you about pasting an image in here. So I'm going to move this stuff out of the way. Now, I don't have my layer palette on here. I'm going to try to ignore my layer palette, even though that's important, but I'm just going to paste it. And there's the pumpkin. Now, I'm going to make it a little bigger so it fits in there. And I could even take the opacity down if I want to see my page a little bit. It's kind of hard. Well, no matter what I do, it's kind of hard to see the page. But I'm going to zoom in a little bit. When I start designing, I'm going to stay out because I want to see it like a billboard. This isn't helping me here, this opacity thing, but because it's kind of hard to see the page. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to crop it. And you might say, well, how do you crop an image? Well, if you click on here, they have a crop feature. And just like in Word and things like that, you could hover over here and pull it down. And I'm going to try to pull it down to the page. And over here, I'm going to pull it into the page. Sometimes it's hard to see the end of the page. You have to go past it and then go back, and hopefully it locks into the page. It seems to lock in with a little green there. And then I'll do it from the bottom. Because remember, it's a billboard. You could go right to the edges. There's no margin on a billboard. So I'm going to click off of that now. Now, keep in mind that when you're cropping, it uses your sub-select tool. So I'm going to go back to my pointer now, so that if you want to treat it like a regular graphic, you could go back to your pointer, and now I'll put my opacity back up. And that's kind of a nice looking pumpkin. I might want to crop it more. It kind of leads in there a little bit, but there's a lot of grass here and stuff, so I might crop it a little bit more. And now I'm not doing any Photoshop type stuff, because normally I might fade this out or something. I mean, you could put a white box over this and kind of fade one side of it. There's ways you could do that in Gravit, but for now, I'm not going to worry about that. I might crop it a little bit more, and that means I got to click on this thing and just hover over. Don't use the four-sided arrow, because that'll move it around. Hover over on the edge where you get that kind of double arrow, and I'm going to crop it over a little bit more, and then I'm just going to click off, and that looks okay. And I'm going to zoom out. And now that's taking up a bigger part of my layout than I wanted to. So that's why I'm zooming back here. And I might go back again. I might actually move it more and then crop it again. And that's okay. Now, I didn't want to spend so much time on the image, but you know, we are kind of starting with that. Now I got to zoom in again, because it's hard to see the edge of our page here. It's really hard to see, but it does turn green when you hover over the edge. And you can see them at the 0. So it is cropped a little, so that might look okay. I'm going to click off, and that looks okay. And you can move it around or whatever, but I'm not worried about that much. But it's a nice looking image just to start off. And it's kind of leading me in a little bit. Now I might fade it off a little bit. And if I wanted to do something that faded, actually, I wasn't planning to do this, but I don't have to do it exactly like my other one. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. If I wanted to fade it off, a quick trick would be make a rectangle. Not real big, just a little narrow rectangle, and fill it with a gradient fill, linear, and it's going black to white. It's going black to white. Let's make it white to white, and then make this white transparent. See what happens. So I'm going to click here and make that white, and I'm going to click on this end and make it white. And it'll just look like a white box. But then this end that I have selected right now, turn the alpha down. This is alpha right here. I'm going to turn it down all the way, and that'll make it transparent. That's why you're seeing that kind of checkerboard thing there. And now, when I click on it, although it's hard to see, we may be able to put it over there a little bit. I think I have to almost put it right on top, and that gets a little bit of a fade. And you could mess with the gradient a little bit and kind of pull the white out a little bit, make it a little harsher, a little softer, you know, bring it over a little bit. It's not perfect, but you see what I'm kind of doing here. That fades it a little bit. Maybe I'll just leave it the way it was, just bring it in maybe slightly. And that's okay, I guess. That's not great. You get the idea of what I'm trying to do here, just kind of fade that out so we don't have such a harsh line. And you could also stretch this out. You could stretch the image out a little bit and then mess with the gradient. So, you know, again, I don't want to get caught up in this kind of stuff here, but that's just one thing you could do. As long as we don't see the edge of the photo, and that looks okay. All right, so that's it. I don't want to dwell on that too much. This isn't you know, Photoshop class or anything, but you know, we are designing, so there's nothing wrong with designing. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I still want to see my whole screen here. I don't want to be way zoomed in. I want to look at it like I'm looking at a billboard. So where would I put Fall Harvest Fest? Now I'm going to move this stuff off a little bit, and I'm going to put my logo here, because typically I'm going to want my logo last. So logo is probably the last thing you want to see. Now it may not be that big, and you may want to put, like I did, the website and that information down here, because it's a nice kind of place to put it underneath. You could just put the website right underneath here. I don't know if you need the address or not. People might want to know if it's local or not. But the next important thing here is going to be Fall Harvest Fest. So let's bring this in. Now we could put it up here. We could make it, you know, the centerpiece of our ad. We could make it go across. We could do that. Now, another thing I want to show you here is that if you want to scale this, instead of just making the point size go up, you know, hovering over this thing, if you want to just stretch it out and scale it, in any direction, there's two ways to do it. One is you could click this transform button and leave it on and then turn it off when you're done. Another one is auto scale font. And this is something I just realized recently. I didn't notice this before. I never even noticed this thing here. But if you click on here, it does the same thing. So you could scale this thing and it scales the box up and it scales the font. So that's kind of neat that it does that. So I'll make this real big, not too big. Now, I didn't put my margins on here. I forgot to do that. I think I was hiding my margins originally. Let me go here and go View, Canvas, Show Guidelines. Now, I have guidelines there from my flyer, so I should go and put these at like a 1/4 inch. So let me go do that before I go too much further, and I'll have to zoom in to do this. So my guidelines are like a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to go around halfway in between that. And I'm just going to do it by eye. It's too hard to get it exactly, so I'm just going to move this guide up about halfway, and then I'll bring a guide down. I might have one down lower, but I'll just bring it. There's 3, so halfway between there. About there. If it's at 0.3 instead of 3.25, that's okay. Because it's a billboard. I mean, it's gigantic, so the margin is that critical. So I'll bring this over so it looks like it's about a 1/4 inch. And I have it pretty close here. So that looks okay, I think. And I'll zoom out now since I have some guides on here, and I'll move this stuff away. Now, I'm doing it different than I did on my other one. My other one, I went with that left justified idea, and that worked pretty well. I did some neat stuff there. I thought it looked okay. But again, I'm just taking a different approach. So this time, I'm trying to be like a student. Like, okay, I have this picture, and I have this big headline here, and that might look good here, and that's fine. And I still might want to put this down here as the last thing you see, as the logo. I mean, if you tried to put the logo up top, it doesn't give you a lot of space to put the logo and get all information because, let me just explain this, because if you do that, you have a lot of space on either side here that may get wasted. That's the problem. If this was on a flyer, that would look nice. But because we have, this billboard space is very expensive, we don't have a lot of places to put stuff here. And if you put stuff here, it would just look crammed in there. So we may not be able to do that. So we want to keep a flow going. And I'll keep this up here and I'll put this down here. And we'll kind of go from there and see how that works. Again, in hierarchy, this is the most important thing. Now, I'm not even worried about color yet. I'm going to nudge this up so it gets right near the top. Not too far to the top, because again, just like on a flyer, we don't want to have it too close to the top. I definitely want to have what the date is and times and things like that. Now, maybe you don't even have to put the times. I don't know if the times are that important, but I'm going to put this in here, and I'm going to make it a little bigger. So I'll go over here and just scroll up on this thing to make it a little bit bigger. Now, I don't even know if I'm going to stay in this font. The problem is on a billboard, this font isn't as sharp as in a sans serif font, but it is pretty big now, and it has a lot of white space here. And this thing is kind of filling up that little nook in there, so that's working out okay. But now I have, the only space I have left over is this here, and I have to, am I going to put in the phone number? I need the web. You should have the website on there. Do we need the address? I don't know. Do we need to put the things that are there? Well, that helps. Maybe they could go over top of the photo or something like that. I'm not sure. Again, I'm just thinking this through as I'm doing it. I didn't plan this out. I didn't decide to do the same exact one I did the first time. I'm just kind of thinking it out like the way you might. So that may be a good place to start. And I'm just doing it all black and white first. I'm not even doing a picture in the background like I did the other one. But, maybe this would look good in an orange color. And actually, I'm going to turn off auto scale font for now. Although one thing I might do is I might scrunch it a little bit, because then I can make it bigger. I can make it a little bit bigger if I scrunch it. And what do I mean by scrunch it? I mean you make it more condensed by making the characters thinner by moving it in there. So I'm going to do that. And I'm keeping it in this font. Now, let me just try something. If I put this in another font, instead of this serif font, which is fine, if I use something like a nice accent font, and remember, we talked about a couple of those, and there was like Libre, Franklin, and Catamaran, and Archivo. Archivo is probably the one that will compete the least. Let me try Libre Franklin. On the last one I did Archivo, on the other one, let me try Libre Franklin and see how that looks. And now it's going to look a lot bigger. I don't want it that big, although it's important. But I'm going to go down a little bit. It was at 36, so I'm just going to scroll down, put it back to 30 again, and see how that looks. Now, this thing is hard to use sometimes. And one thing I think I figured out, if you double-click on here and you just keep your cursor there and you type in like 30 and hit enter, It should work. I've had weird things where it puts in a real small size, and I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing wrong. Haven't figured that out yet, but it seems like if I keep my cursor there, it seems to work better. So this looks cleaner. Now, you might say, well, is it better on one line? Would it look better on one line, 10:7? Maybe that would work. I don't know. Maybe that would certainly give us more space than having two lines like this. So let's try that. As long as we're going to try that, I'm going to zoom in, and we want to make this as short as possible. So we don't need to say 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. because if we said 10 to 7, I mean, what would you think? I said, oh, we're going to be there 10 to 7. You wouldn't think we're going to be there 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. You know it's going to be 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you could just put 10 to 7, or you could just put 10 to 7 like that. You could put a minus sign in there. Again, we'll talk about dashes, whether we should put the dash in there or whether we should put a hyphen in there. Should it be a longer one or not? I'm just going to leave the dash in there. Actually, I'm going to put a hyphen, and that means I'm going to hold down Option and do a dash, and it'll make a little bit longer of a dash. And now I'm still in the same block here, so I could double click in here and try to backspace and get it up there. Now, what would you put between here? Would you put a comma? Would you put a bullet? You could try bullet. Now, on a Mac, I can do Option 8, and I think on Windows you have to do Alt 0149. I think that's what I used to do to make a bullet on Windows, and I think it still works if you hold down your Alt key and do 0149. That means it's a manual bullet. So if I do a space and do Alt 8 on a Mac or Option 8, but if you try Alt 0149 on Windows, see how that works. Now you could do a bullet or you could do a hyphen. Now I'm not sure what would work best here. I'll even put extra space here so they don't get jammed together. And then I'll just move this whole block and see how that looks. Now that will kind of line up underneath. And that's one way to do it. Now, is it readable with all those dates and stuff? I don't know. We'll see. But at least it's clean. I'll zoom out because remember, we're seeing it like a billboard. And, maybe it does need the AM, PM. I don't know. I think that's too much. But I'll just put them together so it's just 10 to 7. And I'll see how that looks. Again, we're just trying this out. This doesn't have to be perfect. It's exercise 4, so this isn't for a portfolio or anything like that. So we have this thing in here, and we still have to get this stuff in. Now, I don't know if we're going to get all that in, obviously, but we definitely want to get in the website. Even if the phone number, we don't get that in, that's okay. But we want to get the website in there because that's where all the information is going to be. And the address might help. Hopefully it's somewhere where people know what Stony Brook Farms is. I don't know if you need the address. I don't know if you said this is at a certain thing, if people will remember the address, if it's a local kind of thing or a big kind of thing. If they just go to the website and look for Stony Brook Farms, you may not need the address either. So that's another thing to think about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here because I don't want this video to get too long. So we're still making decisions and we're kind of laying it out, and we have kind of the top part here. And this is our hierarchy. We have our main important thing here, our top priority, and the date and the time is our second priority, and we have our logo. So we're off to a good start, maybe a little harsh, black and white, but I think we're off to a good start and kind of a different kind of layout than I did the first time. And we'll come back with part 3, and hopefully we can finish this up in part 3 and just do some design work and some fine detail on that version. So make sure you save. And make sure you wait for it to be done syncing. Make sure that bouncing little, whatever that is, a G, I think it's a G for gravit, goes up and down. And now it's saved. So I'll see you back with part 3.